Hello and welcome to the second episode of Life's a Stage with me, Frida Liu, on Jenn TV. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you'll be able to learn some things today from my guests as we go through some life hacks. So this show is based on my book, Life's a Stage. So in the book, I talked about my rebel years as a teenager and the nonsense I got up to and the nonsense I still get up to. So I didn't enjoy school anymore, being uprooted from my country of birth, but not nationality, and having to make new friends at 14, something that was not part of my plan in life, right? So looking back, it was one of my greatest learning periods in my life as I had to learn to be independent and make important decisions about my future. For many years, I was very resentful. I had to make grown-up decisions at such a young age. Now, I'll share more as we go along, but let me first introduce my guests, right? First, we have Andreas Vogiatzakis, Executive Director from AMV Plus Advisory, who has gone to many places from Greece before arriving in Malaysia. He's had an illustrious career in marketing and advertising. So please welcome Andreas. Next we have my good friend, Professor Loredana, Padurean, Associate Dean, Asia School of Business. The first time I met this woman was at a conference, and there she was with this fur jacket and the colorful personality, and I fell in love with her instantly. I got to know this woman. She's also come a long way to Malaysia, originally from Romania, and I know she is still a rebel. So, of course, if you have any questions to them, let us know and we'll try to answer them. Again, welcome and thanks, guys, for agreeing to do this. So when I came up with this topic, I was like, okay, who are the two people? And because I know your stories, right? I said, who are the two people who would be great for this show, right? So, but of course, I want people to know you a little bit, and maybe we'll just start with, what you both are doing at the moment. So, Prof, you first.
So my name is Loredana Padurean. I'm so happy to be here. Congratulations on your new show.
Thank you.
I work with Bank Negara Malaysia in developing and launching a brand new business school called Asia School of Business. It's a collaboration with MIT Sloan, so very excited about that. And I was just telling Frida and Andreas before we got started that our campus is almost ready to host guests. We have a brand new campus. So that's what I do. I'm a professor, I'm a public speaker, and I'm a troublemaker.
Okay. Proudly a troublemaker. Yourself, Andreas, what have you been up to?
All right. Okay. I don't know how to top that. I've been a troublemaker all the time, all around across the world. So I've been trailing around the world from the States back to Greece, Japan, Taiwan, and Malaysia for the last 30, 40 years. And I decided to take the plunge, leave the corporate world last year after just about 30 plus years in corporates, in media, in advertising and marketing. The last job as a group CEO of the Star Media Group, shaping Malaysia in different ways. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to do it completely different. And I was a bit undecided, but then I thought, take the plunge, head in first, then you figure it out.
Right.
So I launched my own advisory last August in the midst of probably the worst pandemic we recently know. In the lockdown, in our lifetime for sure.
Right.
SARS was like an angel compared to COVID. And so I launched AMV Plus Advisory, amvplus.com. And I'm basically focusing on consulting, focusing on training and coaching, which is very, very dear to my heart, with a single purpose of becoming a catalyst for positive change. And positive change is really the pivotal point.
Yeah.
So far so good, and it was a tough decision, but being a rebel, as we discussed today, like you, getting this show done, and congratulations again, by the way, we'll give it a shot.
You're right. And I know, like, one thing you're very passionate about is coaching, right? Because as long as I've known you in advertising and marketing, that was also something that you were already getting very much involved in and incorporating that into the work that you do now. So I'm going to talk about Prof, right? Because I'm going to start with Prof. I know you had this chat and she said,
no pressure.
I've had 19 jobs, okay? You've had 19 jobs, right? And very unique ones as well, right? So go through these 19 jobs, and how did you end up in education, right? And in Malaysia?
So I didn't have 19 jobs. I had 19 different careers in the sense of I had more jobs than 19, I'm sure, but I worked in 19 different places. Anywhere from media to hospitality sales, transportations, constructions, insurance, everything but government, because apparently the unconventional feature of my personality doesn't go there well. So I was thinking about how did I get here? I don't think I ended up here, because I think the road is still ahead of me. But I think all my life I wanted to find a place where I can be truly myself. Right. I remember reading job descriptions as a young girl, and many of the job descriptions had requirements for dress codes. Okay. And I was like, I don't know exactly how that's going to work, because I know their dress code is not mine. But also, I wanted to try places where I can honestly be myself. And because myself, it's a little bit unconventional, which is my favorite attribute to use to describe myself. It's not always intuitive to see where you fit. So, for example, I tried life insurance. It turns out I'm not the right person for life insurance. You know, I tried more professional, or more, if you want, serious businesses. I wasn't really myself. And I never wanted to be a professor, because, to be very honest, between the three of us and 3,000 people who are watching, I have never seen somebody who was not, at least in my case, I'm not saying everywhere, but at least in my case, was not an older man who would come and sit at the desk and start reading from a book in a very sort of paternal way, if you're lucky. However, through many adventures, I got to spend a little bit of time at MIT, MIT Sloan in Boston. And I saw a few people that were very rebellious compared to everything else I've seen back home, including women, but also men. I remember walking in a classroom at MIT, and the faculty had a piece of chalk and threw it against the wall and started dancing on the board. And I was like, oh my God, I made it. I'm home. These are my people. Right. So I ended up in academia, not because I always wanted to be a professor, but I think I love it because I always wanted a place where I can speak my mind and I can share my thoughts. And like you, Andreas, I'm passionate about training and coaching and learning. And believe it or not, as much as we think that academia is a very traditional, sort of anti-rebellious environment, it's quite the opposite. It's just that some of us have this visual or this expectation that it is what we used to know it is. Right. So for me, this was the place that accepted everything about myself and more. Right. The stereotype, right? That perception of what it is, right? And okay, I know that one time you were a fashion police on TV. Yes. So I did that for like 30 seconds of my life. Right. I used to be chronically shy, but to the point where I would hyperventilate. Okay. If you, only in this kind of conversation. Yeah. And I was doing makeup for fashion shows, one of my 19 different professions. And the host of the show, it was a Miss something, Miss Romania, Miss something. And she said, why don't you come on TV and do my makeup? Sure. I was doing it for free anyway. I was 25, 24. And when I got there, the guest dropped last second. Okay. And they were running around looking for a guest. And she said, you should be on the show. I'm like, I can't even speak. Like, she said, no, get on the show and we'll talk about makeup. So I was like, okay. So we had a camera like here, and there was a red dot on the camera. And I kept watching that red dot. Like, I was so scared of red dot. And then the second the camera went on, another person came over and took my body. And I was like all excited to talk to people about things. And after that, she said, you know what, we're going to offer you a segment. And I did, like I said, for a little bit of my time, I did a fashion police show. So I used to walk on the streets with a camera guy, arrest people for bad taste and give them a makeover. And somehow nobody punched us in the face. And we did that for a while, which was a lot of fun. But I think it helped me a lot to be very comfortable in front of my students, in front of a big stage. You know, media teaches you how to be a lot more comfortable with yourself. It doesn't teach you necessarily how to be comfortable in front of others, but how to be comfortable with yourself. Right. And that really helped me. Yeah. Right. And then, so I wanted to bring up again the fact that you said that you tried different industries, and it was because you didn't feel this industries fit you, because it was like, I had to fit into a box, right? And MIT said there is no box. Yeah. Or if there is, the box is so big that you never see the edges. Right. Like, it's so interesting to see the level of unconventionality you find in a school like MIT. Right. I mean, I spent only a very little time, but now I work with a lot of MIT faculty, and anywhere from some of the most spectacular minds and beautiful people to very, very, very bookwormishy and nerdy, but you find anything you want and you can be anything you want. So that was for me the big surprise, because I had these expectations, maybe like many of us, that all the universities look the same and all the schools look the same. But I also spent a little bit of time at Harvard. I also noticed that there's a lot of people who are naturally, truly themselves. And I was like, wow, so there's a place that will take me as I am. And that was a massive, massive moment of, you know, satisfaction, acceptance, making peace with who you are. Because I'm sure that the three of us, being the rebels that you think we are, it's not an easy path to accept yourself, because the society will always try to force you in this box. And one of the things I tell my students is, whoever built this box, like, why do we even have this box? Who built it? Who put us in this box? But there is a box. And I think the reason why we have this box is it's very hard to process the heterogeneity that we have as people. You are different, I'm different, I'm different. It's very hard to do it. So what do you do in business? You try to say, all right, you are this person with this job, doing this thing, behaving this way. Because it's a lot easier to deal with boxes than with individualities.
Right. And I think right now when we always talk about diversity and all that, right? That's what it is, right? Accepting the fact that people are different and it's good.
Yeah.
And even like in
hard.
And hard, right? And in businesses, it's the people who said, the unicorns that we hear of are these people who said, why must it be done this way, right? I mean, let's do it another way. And that's rebellious, but that's where you get the unicorns. The boy from Crete in Greece. How did you end up here?
Well, definitely jumping out of the box. I love that box, Professor Loredana. I do. There are a lot of boxes in life, and I think that I have never been mistaken for 1 minute about structure and form, right? Which gives me, for example, and at least a direction. But that doesn't mean you're not a rebel, and you don't break the box and you shred it and you reconstruct it in your own way. Right. I was born in the village of Akalahori in the middle of Crete. It was not blue and white, as I post in my Facebook, right? It was really muddy to pick up olives in the olive groves back then, and I didn't like it. I wanted to be a mathematician because math had structure. It was a great box. It was a fantastic box, and it gave me structure, it gave me reason, it gave me logic, and it didn't lie. It was true. Only to realize when I got into the math school that, in fact, this was not the one that I wanted to be in love with. It served me well for 6 years. Dad died, everything changed. So that structure and path was for me, but not anymore. So that's when I rebelled. And I think I rebelled against myself and what I was getting myself into. I don't think it was about the rest, it was about me. Even though I realize it now that I look back to connect the dots I collected. But at that time I didn't know. And I turned from a math man to a madman because I fell in love with advertising. And thanks to my sister, I went all the way to New York to Florida to study advertising, and life took a totally different path ever since. But I think that in that box, in that structure, I think rebellion is the greatest thing, because it really makes you think different. You are that square peg in the round hole, right? And I knew I couldn't fit. I knew this is not what I wanted to do, but I didn't know what to do. And society back then was very different. I let my hair long. I started playing heavy metal. And I was different. And I didn't fit anywhere. But then I think you put it perfectly right, Professor. It is about coming to terms with yourself. Right. But you don't know it then. And when you are young, when you're 18, 19, 24, you don't know what you're doing. Right. And you don't have anchors, you don't have safety nets, and you're experimenting, you are trying to find out your own personality. And I think that that rebel in us is perhaps the best thing that has happened, at least to me, and I'm pretty sure to all of us, right? Because it makes you realize what you want. I found my true passion, which led me in that life journey that brought me here, trailing around the world from the States to Japan, Taiwan, and Malaysia, right? And when I look back, I think that nothing of that would have happened if you wouldn't rebel, if you wouldn't go against what everybody else expects you to do. And I'm writing that in my book, but it is about doing, at the end of the day, what really is good for you. And even if you live one more day, that's going to be one more day of what you really want to be and how you find your purpose to be. And when you write your eulogy, right, you're happy with it. So Rebel in Us, I think, does good things.
Right. I think it's freeing yourself.
And you know,
exactly.
So when I look at the both of you, I mean, what was interesting is, you know, it's not easy, you know, leaving the comforts of your what is home, right? Or, you know, the familiarity or certain things to move, right? It's not an easy thing, and I guess and everywhere you go, it's a new culture to learn, right? And then of course you also as much as trying to conform to the culture, you also have certain beliefs and everything, you know. I mean, what are your thoughts around that? Okay, you know, like maybe you're now, okay, he's Malaysian, he takes his durian and almost Malaysian.
The first thing she said when she walked in was, "Where is nasi lemak?"
Where's the nasi lemak, right? Okay, so you've acclimatized and gotten used to it. And like, so when I think about being a rebel, for me, it's not so much the outwardliness, but like if I can't live authentically, then it's very difficult, right? And it doesn't. And if I don't hurt anybody in the process of living authentically, then it's okay, right? Because I got to live with me, right? And I got to wake up and look in the mirror. If I'm not happy, then that's terrible, right? So Andreas, you've got a book on the way, and also you were quite a rebel in your university days. Can you talk a little bit about that period?
The long hair.
The long hair. Well, the silly goal of the long hair and the heavy metal was to hopefully get groupies. We didn't get not even one. And the band didn't even get to perform because the bass guitarist got in a brawl with the drummer, and it all went to hell in a handbasket. So it was a complete, absolute disaster. But it was good and it was fun. And my dream ever since that day was to be a mathematician, to get into the mathematics school of Athens, one of the most prestigious schools in the country at that time. And for 6 years, through the thick and thin, that's exactly what I had set my eyes and heart on. And I achieved that, only to realize when I got in there that that's not really what I wanted to do. It served me very, very well in these 6 years.
Right.
And yes, in the book, I'm going to talk about that and how it really served me to give me that direction and logic and path. But it was not, I realized that it was not what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. Even though I enjoyed teaching math, simple math to kids, right? Elementary school kids. And that's where I rebelled. I rebelled because I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what I wanted to be. I was disenamored with the love of my life for 6 years that brought me to that point. And I was also feeling a little bit guilty that how can you now let everybody else that put their aspirations and dreams and hopes on you, and that was a burden on the shoulder, right? On both shoulders, actually. So I was feeling guilty and I was feeling pressured and I was feeling lost and I didn't know what I like. And that's where everything really happened. And so I let my hair long. You know, I was getting here and there, working in the fields that I didn't really like to when I was growing up because I could make a living and get some pocket money to
literally in the fields.
Literally.
I did that too.
And you know how it is, right? And it was through that process of rebellion, through that process of searching, that the penny dropped on advertising, and I thought, this is really what I want to do. I love connecting with people. Now, funny enough, I'm actually an introvert, right? And people don't believe that. I like my me time. I can be totally happy in my room for 10 days, you know, and I can write my stuff and do things. But I love the interaction and all that. So advertising gods decided that they're going to show me the path, and the penny dropped, and life changed forever. And I think that if it wouldn't be for that rebellion, and it goes through pressure, and it goes through that emotional pressure that I need to fulfill a purpose for others, that everything happened. So I love rebellion, and even today and always, these values and these thoughts and principles that guided me throughout the journey still hold true. You know, where do you conform? Where do you cut out to? Where do you agree to? Life is tough and beautiful at the same time, right? So you gotta decide, where do you keep the balance? You cannot be a rebel for the sake of being a rebel.
Right.
Just because you need to go against the status quo, right? You gotta do it for a reason. At that time, I didn't know what the reason was, but when the penny dropped and it all came into place, then it was very, very clear. So from a dropout of the math school, I actually didn't step my foot on one class except once a year. So you can take the exam and then you're proclaimed as a student, right? Never.
Okay.
I graduated from the University of Florida with high honors and a straight 4.0 on advertising and marketing. That's not important. The important thing is that when you don't love what you do, nothing will happen. And when you love what you do, everything will happen effortlessly. So you gotta love what you do, love who you're doing it with, who you're doing it for, where you do it at. And if you don't love it, leave it and do what you really love.
Right. If you have any questions for any of us, do send them over, you know, and we'll try to address them. You know, but okay. So what you said, and I want Prof to chime in as well. You know, this, as you want to go and do math. You could have been the professor. If you had done maths, and
still
this was
time.
and no one forced you to do maths because that was your love, right? And so, but everybody's been talking about it for years, leading up to university, and then this is what I want to do, and the burden, like you said, you know, of that with your parents, right? How do you handle that? Because I think that's tough, right? I'm talking to my son right now, who doesn't, well, he's sort of figured out what he wants to do, and I tell him, you know, just doing this course doesn't mean you have to do this for the rest of your life. Do this, enjoy this whole experience. You might come out of this and say, I want to do something completely different, and it's okay. I want to tell him it's okay, right? Just do something that you enjoy. But at that point, like, what was it like? You know, you feel like you're letting your family down, and that's the thing, right? Being the rebel, sometimes you feel like you're right. So, Prof, you want to say anything about that?
Well, imagine that you're my mother, and I go to you, and I was like, so now I have the 16th job and I'm still 30. I remember going to tell her that I'm going to do a PhD, and she said, oh boy, we're going to tell the neighbors that you're still in school at this age. So there is this, I so resonate to what you said about the sense of responsibility you have for those who you love, but I think it's also, I'm very self-centric in the sense that I realized that for the longest time I lived my life for others, and I was extremely unhappy.
Right.
And the second I turned the books on me, and I said, all right, from now on I'm going to try to live the life for me, at the cost of not making everybody else happy around me, but trying to make me happy. And what it turns out is that when I wasn't happy, my parents were not happy, my friends were not happy, because I was impossible to deal with. Not that I'm easy now, but when I became happier, they became happier, because energy is contagious. So it took a while for my family, for my loved ones, or my friends to make peace with the fact that I'm constantly trying to find myself in the process. But I think at some point you have to choose yourself. And it's not a popular norm in society, especially in Asia. It's not a popular concept to admit it, that you're self-centric and you do things for yourself. But what I decided is, at some point I said, you know what? I can choose to live my life for others. I can choose to live my life for my family, who they were very good intentional. They had the right intentions in mind, but they couldn't really know what I'm going through because I'm not them. As much as we share the same blood, I am not my parents.
That's right.
And I see my students doing the same thing and trying multiple things. And, there is this belief that once you try something, stick with it. And I don't believe in that necessarily. I think if you try something and it doesn't fit you, just make sure that you don't drop out because it's hard.
Right.
But once you realize it's not for you, like from math to Madman, why not try it? I mean, who am I going to live my life for? Somebody else? And that somebody else is going to come and validate my choices for them? No. So it's painful to choose yourself.
Yeah.
Right. It is painful to choose
but
yourself.
I think if I can add to that, right, the difficulty is, and I love what you said, like energy is contagious, 100%. 110%. But the tough part is, that if you're happy, others will be happy, but there's going to be a period of time that they will realize that. And that is a tough one. And you got to hang in there.
Before they realize
it, until they do. And then miraculously they convert. Wow. Now you are successful.
I always knew it.
Yes.
So many people tell me I always knew it. I was like, why didn't you tell me? You let me, drive myself crazy for 20 years. Why didn't you tell me everything's going to work out? But you're absolutely right. There is this transition period, and you have to stick with that.
Yeah.
But once you're happy and they're happy, it almost feels like, oh, this was so easy. It wasn't.
Right.
It feels like that.
Now, I don't know your family situation with whatever, but okay, I know in the case of Andreas, right? Was there less of that rebelliousness because you had the responsibility of, your kid? You had the responsibility of that, right? So I've got to be the proper man, and put food on the table. Did you lose the rebelliousness?
Okay, I have to admit that somehow, you get a few anchors here and there, but I don't think that is a bad thing. I think it's a good thing. I love my son. He gives me a lot of purpose, and he teaches me, without him knowing actually, a lot of things about me. Right. And I screw it up every single day, but I keep at it because, that bond is bigger than anything. And so yes, it puts a few things into a different perspective, that it gives you a responsibility, but it's a responsibility that you embrace and you love and you feel good and proud about, right? Within that, rebellion to me doesn't mean anymore like you rebel and you do anything or something for the sake of doing it differently. That to me means nothing. It means that when you come at the crossroads and you're not happy with what you're doing now, you will give it the best that you have to do something different, to try, and to be willing to fail, willing to be on your knees, to beg, to be rejected, and all that kind of stuff that happen when you start something new that you have never really tried before, but with a sense of responsibility, responsibility to yourself, first of all. So that's a good thing.
I think for me, I held back a little bit when my son was younger. I had to be responsible, and and not that I'm so rebellious, but like I did things more for me now that he's a little bit older. But there was that, and no, I don't resent it. He didn't ask to be born, right? So if you have a child, you got to be responsible in that sense, right? But well, he's a little bit grown up.
But I think we all go through that. I don't have children, but there were moments in my life when I felt like, okay, now I'm going to have to push through. Doing my PhD program was not a fun experience of my life, but I knew, okay, now I'm responsible to this goal. I'm going to have to be responsible in the sense of, I can't drop everything at the drop of my hat because I want to go and party in Mykonos because Crete was not that popular. But that's what I mean by that. You have to, you're responsible to a goal, and if the goal is big and important and requires you to step back from some of the things that you would love to do but you can't do because the goal is there.
The opportunity cost.
There is an opportunity cost.
That's right. And you said it right? You don't quit something for the sake of quitting it. You quit something because something that you really love is what came along, and that doesn't really represent who you are and what you believe in and your purpose anymore. And that's perfectly okay.
Absolutely.
I think the the biggest challenge to overcome for many people is to accept that and get de-anchored for something that is not them anymore. And that's okay. There is a stigma to that.
Right.
I mean, we will never do that to our kids, right? But now they're 17, right?
18.
They're done. They know who they are. They're young adults. So.
I wanna say something to what you said about giving up when it's hard. So there are things that are hard, and then there are things that make you unhappy, and they're not always the same thing.
Yes.
Like, you could do something that you love and it's so damn hard, but you're not going to quit because it's hard.
Yes.
In my case, I think a lot of people say, how did you just jump from a job to a job, from career to career? It wasn't because it was easy. Do you really think that it was easy to constantly try to find my way through life, or have days when I would literally eat bread and walk to wherever I had to go because I didn't have money? It would have been so much easier for me to stay in one place and get that steady paycheck and be like, you know what, everybody else is doing it. So I think there has to be a massive, warning signal here that quitting something because it's hard is very different than quitting something because it makes you unhappy. Nothing that I've done in my life was easy in that sense, but because it made me happier, it didn't feel that hard.
Right.
100%.
Okay. If there are any questions, let us know. Okay. Now, I just want to talk about maybe, and we've sort of talked about it, right? About this expectation because you're a rebel, and then of course this perception of this professor and all that, right? And I'm sure people, prof, right? The first time I saw you, but I love that. But this whole idea of the way you dress, right? And do you want to get people to get a mindset shift in the process the moment they meet Professor Loredana?
So it didn't start like that, at all.
Okay.
I grew up extremely poor. I grew up in communism where we had two colors, black and navy blue. And my grandmother, who was my hero, she was also a seamstress by need, not by formation. And we used to buy fabric from we had very little. I don't know if you guys know what communism looks like, but you have stores that are empty. So every now and then they would bring a little bit of fabric, mostly for linen, for bed linen. Right. And she would make me a little bit of a dress or a little bit of a skirt. So for me, getting dressed up it's a feeling that reminds me of the happiness I had by spending that time with her. Right. So it started like that. And then later on, I remember I was in 9th grade and we had uniforms. I grew up in a system with uniforms, even though by then communism was over. And my mother got called in school because my uniform was too short because I had to do something with it. And my mother said, are her grades affected by the size of her skirt? Right. And the principal said, no, she's actually top 3 in class. So my mother, who's very conventional, this is the proudest thing that she's ever done for me. She said, well, if the skirt doesn't get in the way, what's your problem? Wow. So for me, like I said, it started with this feeling of, being connected to my grandmother, having things that were not necessarily always black and blue. And then only when I moved to Malaysia, which is 6 years ago, the primary question or reaction that I get when I meet with somebody, they take a little bit of a step back and said, you're a professor, but you don't look like a professor. And then the second question is, I think you should work in fashion instead of doing what you do. So I always thought it's like, you were talking about cheese. Like, if I like cheese, should I work in a dairy factory, like in a cheese shop? Yeah. Fashion is a mean. Right. Fashion is not just for people who work in fashion. Right. So then in time, I have to admit it, I'm using it now as a signal. Right. Because just because I dress this way, it is because I'm passionate about it. But I also giving you a warning that this is not going to be what you expect. Right. Yeah. So it's a lot easier for me to give you my business card, which is this. Right. Because once you're going to get to know me, this seems tamed and nice and conventional, and calm compared to what's coming. So I'm just giving you a little bit of warning. People, when you see me and I'm unconventionally dressed, it's because I'm trying to warn you so you don't chicken out when I start talking. But having said that, there used to be this campaign. They even had it at MIT, look like a woman, right? And they would say, oh, an engineer is supposed to look like this. A scientist is supposed to look like this. And they were playing on that, right? We have these amazing women who are astronauts and engineers and, scientists and whatever you want, agricultural workers and miners and truck drivers. And we expect them to look in this way. Yeah. And then what if I don't want to look that way? Who told you that I I should do what you think of me. So, like I said, in my case, it started as a emotional relationship with my grandparents and my environment. But as I developed in life, my passion for fashion, I realized it's also a signal, and it should be there because this is a lot.
Right, and it's so external, right? I mean, even when I'm working radio, I say, "Why do you dress up on your radio?" Radio. I'm like, I dress up for me, right? I feel good.
That's right.
When I lived in US, especially Boston is very casual. It's very sports, very casual. Right. So I was probably the only European in my school as a teacher, as a faculty, and I used to go to class, and my colleagues would ask me, "Do you have a special day today? Is it like a special event? Why you dressed up?" I was like, "'Cause it's Tuesday and." Because I took a shower and I feel like I need to put on some clothes. But yeah, I think it's this attempt of let me try to put you in the box that I can recognize,
Okay, now I want to talk a little bit about, we always have this conversation about sharp and smart, right? Can you explain this context? And is it a way of being rebellious whenever you talk about being sharp and smart?
So, like you said, Andreas, before, I'm not rebellious for the sake of being rebel. I mean, yes, it's fun, and I get it to be invited on your show, and people talk about it, but I only rebel, if the definition of rebel is somebody who takes a stand. I only rebel against things that make me think, do they still should be this way?
Right.
So the smart and sharp concept is an extension or a contribution to the existing soft and hard. So soft and hard skills, I grew up learning about soft and hard skills. And then about 7 years ago, I started thinking as a manager. So I'm a professor of management, but I'm also a manager. And I have to say, it's so much easier to teach management than to do management because people are terrible. I don't like people. The job is easy. People are not. But everybody would tell me as a coach and as a trainer, we want to train people on soft skills, but they don't want to call them soft skills. And it's true. There's nothing soft about dealing with diversity, dealing with complex situations. Empathy, board members, egos, validation, right?
Negotiation.
So I started thinking, why do we call this skill soft? There's nothing soft about this. At the same time, I mean, you were a math whiz. I was the opposite. I didn't like math. I didn't like physics. I didn't like chemistry. But I also didn't like the fact that they were always referred as the hard skills. These are the hard skills. Turns out that, math, it's easier than dealing with people.
Yes,
right?
That's right.
So I don't like that concept of hard either. So when I moved to Malaysia and we started leading ASB, I said, this is it. Nobody's allowed to use the word soft in this school. And nobody's allowed to use the words hard in this school because for me, the skills required to deal with people are smart skills. You have to be smart to know how to deal with people.
Right.
And the same thing about these hard skills. There's an implication that they are like this death. They are hard. They are not dynamic. And I mean, even in the world of math, I think there is some dynamics developments because I see a lot of my colleagues from MIT, right? So for me, the skills, they have to be sharpened because you constantly have to relearn them. You can't really just say, I learned math in 4th grade, I'm good. It turns out even math evolves, right? Engineering, chemistry, data optimization, modeling, whatever you want. So I call them sharp and smart. And my question to you, my loves, is would you rather be soft and hard or smart and sharp?
Right.
So I'm not a rebel against, once again, without the cause. That. But these concepts were invented in 1972, people, by a U.S. Army doctor who looked around at his people and were like, those who can shoot people those are hard skills. We're going to call those hard skills.
Right.
And then how are we going to call the other skills, like the skills of dealing with people? Soft, right?
Right.
So, okay, fine. They serve a purpose for 50 years.
Right.
But shouldn't they get another look at and you don't need to be rebellious to look at this and be like, I don't think this is soft.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's very interesting, right? The words we use. No, I'm still hung up with what your mom said, though. You know what I mean? Like it's a length of a skirt affecting her ability to study, and that's very important.
Yeah.
That's very important, right? There's a deep meaning to that, right? But okay,
she's gonna be so happy to hear that. I'm gonna let her know. Hi, Mom. She's watching.
Okay, I'm gonna give you the pictures of your dogs.
Nice.
So we were talking about our teenage boys, right? And the challenges in raising them. Your 16-year-old, my 18-year-old, right? 17, right? So are we encouraging the rebellious spirit in them? So And
Yeah.
and my son is an angel compared to me at this age, but still it is
Yeah.
so. And you know, you don't want him to be. I want my son to be
Yeah.
street smart as
Yep.
well.
That's right.
Smart and sharp, maybe.
Smart and sharp.
Some
Yeah,
sort of-
exactly.
I call them power skills.
Okay.
And
Power
I
through.
push that. Yeah, I drill that completely. Power skills. If my son does to me,
What?
I don't think he's listening.
Okay.
What I did to my mom, I'd kill him.
Right.
Well,
Wow.
don't say that on TV, but yeah.
Right.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
don't say that on TV.
Right.
So
That's just how.
I want him to be a rebel. I want him to be a rebel that doesn't take no for an answer,
Okay.
who doesn't do what others are expecting him to do, a rebel who chooses to do what he loves, what he finds purposeful for him, and who is not afraid to change that if that does not serve that purpose anymore. And if his vision for his own life changes, how can all that stay constant forever? It's just impossible. It's an oxymoron. It's stupid. When you are a 20-year-old or an 18-year-old, can you imagine we are asking an 18-year-old to choose a career
Right.
Oh, yeah.
for
Yeah.
the rest
Right.
of their lives,
Right.
and they have to stick with it?
Right.
And no matter what happens, if you choose to be a professor of math, then that's what you really have to do for the rest of your life because society expects you to. What kind of bollocks is this?
Right.
A big one.
A big one, right? So I want him to feel free and empowered that he can change that anytime he wants, as long as he gives his best
Yeah, exactly.
to what he believed in to see if it works for not and if it is for him. Not because it is hard to do, but it's because I don't love this anymore, and I'm very clear about that. So I would love him to be a rebel in that sense. I'm blessed that he's an amazing man with great principles and values and a very good intellect. He has a good captain in his ship,
Right.
I think, up here, and that's the most important thing. So being rebellious to the things he doesn't love anymore will be a good thing, and I do hope he is.
Because I'm just like having, you know, conversations with my kid as well, right? Like, you know, when you start something, you've got to finish it. They don't love it anymore, right?
Yeah.
But then you try. It's like, how do you?
Yeah,
Anyway.
yeah, that's right.
If you get an answer, you can let us know.
Yeah.
I want to
right.
talk. I'm just very mindful of time as well, right? I want to talk about your books, though, Prof. You know, I know your current book, Nail It, Scale It, and Sail It. What's the premise of that book?
So, most of my work, both my 19 different jobs and the current job, I was very entrepreneurial. I never worked for an environment that was already set in stone and everybody knew what they were doing. And like I said before, I learned that being a professor of management, it's a lot easier than being a manager. And teaching about entrepreneurship, it's a lot easier than doing entrepreneurship. But coming here to Malaysia 6 years ago and building a school from scratch, this big, beautiful Asia School of Business, gave me the opportunity to think about entrepreneurship from the practice perspective, right? You're the one doing it.
Right.
So I started teaching this first, because that's what you do. You want to learn something, you teach it,
Right.
You know this because you also taught. And then the more I started teaching about entrepreneurship, the more I connected it to my experience of building ASB, running a ski resort in Switzerland, having a fashion agency, building an app, all the crazy things that I did in my life. And because I never liked theory, believe it or not, I'm a professor who didn't do well in school. But I always think, speaking of kids, I don't have kids. I used to be a kindergarten teacher, one of my 19 careers. And what I learned from my kids was that they don't like peas. They don't like the peas. They don't like the veggies. So we used to hide them in the mashed potatoes. Turns out adults are the same. They don't like theory, the peas. They like the mashed potatoes, the stories. And I'm like that. I can't stand learning a dry theory, and I feel like I need a glass of wine to go with it. So my book is trying to tell, if you want, the theory of evolution. How do companies evolve? How do they grow? And then how do they become big sustainable companies? But more from a metaphorical perspective. So I think of the first stages of setting something from scratch. Like you're doing this show from scratch, this channel is something from scratch. Feels a little bit like going through the jungle with machete, where you don't have a lot of clarity ahead of you. You don't know exactly what's going to happen, but you have to push through. And then once you manage to do that, it's a whole story, but once you manage to do that and you start scaling and growing, the second stage feels a little bit like hiking up a peak, a mountain. When I lived in Switzerland, I used to see these hikers and they have this equipment and tools and the Swiss knife. And then once you manage to successfully scale that side of the company, that mountain, the rest of the journey is like sailing in the ocean, but not always in smooth waters. Exactly.
Right?
You have threats and opportunities.
You got to change the direction.
But wind changes. You have potential threats from behind. So I've been teaching this for 8 years now, both at MIT, at IMD, at ASB, and it's highly validated by people from the industry because they feel like, you know what, it speaks exactly to my pain. So that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to learn about entrepreneurship by doing it, by watching it, by observing it, and by telling a story that hides a little bit of the peas that we don't like that much.
I like that. The peas are in the mashed potatoes. Okay. So you get both your good stuff, right?
Yes,
all in one mouthful.
But it's yummy.
Exactly. Add broccoli.
Your upcoming book.
Yes.
Tell us.
Yes. Somebody said, we all know who, that you need to look back to collect the dots. And I say that we need to collect dots to connect the dots.
Okay.
And so it's my attempt to do that. I love talking about journeys. I love talking about leadership. I love talking about power skills, empathy, self-awareness, adaptability, and resilience. All that stuff that helped me go through the troubled waters and arrive at this point. Not that I'm not going through troubled waters at the moment, but at least you got to look back on some validated principles that you believe in and guided you through. So I thought it would be interesting to share that journey. Not because I don't have arms and legs, like some don't, and they have amazing stories to tell. I do. I'm healthy. I'm fairly okay. But I think everybody has a story to tell, and we can learn from it.
Right.
And what I wanted to do is to put it all together in a book. And in fact, one of the chapters is Rebel with the Cause, not without.
Okay.
And in the attempt to share that and use that as an excuse to have these discussions.
Right.
Have these discussions about what's your journey?
Right.
When you look back, what you want to take out of it? How do you want to do it different moving forward? Even if you have one more day to live, how do you want to live it? What are the values and the principles that guided you through that? Would you continue to have the same? Would you adjust it? Is there something that you would want to get rid of and something else that you want to add to your repertoire and make you stronger and better? Life is beautiful, and it might not be easy. It might have its twists and turns, but the stormy waters are the best waters because that's where all of this stuff gets onto the test. Everybody can sail the ship in calm waters, right? Yeah. So I wanted to just do that, share it with everybody. I've been running companies in Asia, especially from Japan to Taiwan and Malaysia, building them from scratch, readjusting their cultures, bringing them to success, sometimes from zero to hero, like Havas Media here in Malaysia, right? And so what were the principles that guided me through that? Not only to achieve success, but also to screw up. So when I didn't do that good, why? How could I have done it better?
Right.
And if I were to do it again tomorrow, how could I have behaved differently and be better? Not in a sense of regret, but in a sense of self-awareness and acceptance. In order to do to achieve a better state for you. And like you said, energy is contagious.
Right.
To really be who you love to be, and therefore for the others to benefit from it. So I wanted to share that with everybody. The launch got postponed a few times because
I'm monitoring you.
like Professor Loredana said, and it's exactly right. Theory and practice, two different things. So I've never published a book before,
Right.
and so you deal with publishers, you deal with suppliers, you deal with distributors. I thought I'm going to self-publish it, and none of this I knew. There is not a manual.
Right.
And it's an amazing journey. Let me tell you, so far, since last August that this journey started, coinciding with the launch of AMV Plus, I've done an enormous amount of mistakes. A very, very dear good friend of mine, I don't know if you're watching, told me one of the mistakes that I did last night. And I thought, oh my gosh, in your excitement to do it,
You forgot.
you do it wrongly. You do some things wrong. And then you have to have that self-awareness and comfort with yourself to say, yeah, I screwed up, I'm sorry, and be vulnerable to it and accept it and do it better.
Right.
And so I want to share that. So it's coming up
Okay.
in July.
Okay.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
Okay.
yeah.
All right. I just want to close off with, your final thoughts about the whole idea of being a rebel. I know, for example, like Prof, maybe what you share with your students, perhaps.
So I was thinking about, as you were talking, I was thinking that the first time I interacted with our future students. So when we first started ASB, we didn't have a budget for marketing. We didn't even have a marketing team or an advertising team.
Right.
So I did the first video for ASB, and I remember being on top of the helipad in Kuala Lumpur, and there was a drone coming towards me, and I looked at the camera thinking of my future students who might see this. And my question for them was, have you broken any rules lately? Because if you have, we want you.
Right.
Because the idea was we're going to build something that is so unconventional, and that's one of the values of ASB, that we are looking for rebels.
Right.
Because rebels attract rebels,
Right.
right? Because you feel validated, you feel like, oh, somebody else is living their truth and it's living their life. And ASB stands for two things. It stands for being extraordinary and unconventional.
Right.
Because I think of rebel as the unconventional part of it, but I don't want to be rebel unless I also have excellence as a baseline.
Right.
I think otherwise you're just a troublemaker with no purpose.
Right.
Yes.
So my message to our students is excellence is the baseline, and that's why we want extraordinary and unconventional. And we want them to be unconventional because we want people who truly have who walk their truth, who walk in their path, or maybe they can't find it now and they want us to help them. So my final message for today would be exactly who you want to be, but also hold yourself at the highest standards of excellence. Because otherwise, mediocrity, nobody writes a book about being mediocre.
Right.
Nobody leads the company by being mediocre.
Right.
Have you seen a great movie who won an Oscar by talking the story of somebody who lived a mediocre life?
Right.
Very few.
Right.
That's right.
So there are standards, and then okay, great. Andreas.
Wow. I totally 100% agree with that. Mediocrity is nothing, but how to top that up? I guess I can leave you with this. Love what you do. Love who you're doing it with. Love where you're doing it, and love why you're doing it for. And if you don't love it, leave it and do something that you really love, and have the courage to rebel against conformity, against even your own beliefs that are not suiting your personality and who you are anymore, as long as you have that purpose and you're clear what you really, really want to do. So love what you do with all your might. And if you don't, just rebel and do what you really want to do.
Thank you, Jenn, Prof. Loredana, and also Andreas. I think I want to conclude with, the rebel with a cause, right? I think when you have a purpose and people don't understand what you're doing, if you've seen a rabbit chasing a dog chasing a rabbit, right? A dog chasing a rabbit, you think, okay, the dog's chasing the rabbit. Now, if you take the rabbit out of the picture, right, you just look like a crazy dog. And maybe people can't see that rabbit, right? And so people think you're being a rebel. But if you're clear about what you're trying to do and you're doing it with a purpose, who cares what people think, right?
That's right.
So thank you again, from rebel to ... still rebel. Okay, I'll be back in 2 weeks' time on another very interesting topic with two very other interesting guests. and we'll be sharing all this information on Jenn TV as well. So thanks for spending your afternoon or wherever you're seeing this repeat, Live the Stage with Rita Liu on Jenn TV. We'll be back again. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
guys.
Thanks,
Bye.
Rita. Thank you.